It's been fascinating thinking over the last 3 months or so that I've been sitting in this chair talking to you, and you've very kindly come in your thousands to watch and listen to my monologue, I suppose, my little chats with you. And I thank you greatly for that. It's been fascinating to explore as I've asked the questions, what's going on? The world seems to have changed. Rather nasty things seem to be thrust at us. And it's bothered me, it's confused me. And of course, people have come forward and they've shared links to blogs, to videos, to articles, and I appreciate that. Thank you. It's been fantastic to have the appreciation from the audience for what I do as well, and I thank you for that too. It's also been interesting to see how the use of fear by the government, by the powers that be, by authority, has been utilised to manipulate all of us. It's so clear that it's almost impossible to believe it's true, and yet there it is. We've been made frightened. Of course, it started during the pandemic. We were told about the virus that was going to come and kill us. Although that's not strictly true, we were initially told that it would only attack those people of, say, over 80 or those people with comorbidities. And then suddenly the government changed their tune and it was everybody. And then there was one policy that we had to do. We had to stay indoors. We had to protect everybody from getting the virus, and we had to no longer rely on something that we've always relied on as human beings, natural immunity. And the fear, by keeping us in our houses and keeping us isolated, grew and grew. But don't worry, there was a medical cure that was going to save us. And so that was implemented and in many cases mandated, not just in this country, but across the world. And we've seen how successful that has been. The MPs tell us so. The government refused to mention any of the harms that may be associated with it. They think it's been very successful, safe and effective. But anybody with that medical intervention will know that it hasn't been quite safe and effective, for there have been many harms that have happened as a result of it. And now we're in a strange time where people all of a sudden seem to be dropping down dead, or they're having terrible heart attacks, or all sorts of side effects like strokes and things like that. But the government won't entertain that has anything to do with the implementation of a certain medical procedure. And so people become frightened in a way that doesn't really come out from the government, but it's there nonetheless. What have I taken into my body? What will happen to me? And there are worrying reports coming out to say that if you've taken these medications, that they could in fact shorten your life. This is very scary and very worrying, and fear is being used all over the place. And now we've had these strange consultations that have come up. These consultations to ask the members of the public what they think about digital IDs or the central bank digital currencies. Now, the thing about these consultations is they weren't rolled out so that everybody actually knew about them. They just appeared on the government's own website. Almost blink and you would have missed it. Some alert people did see them and started to tell other people about them. And people have responded by saying, actually, do you know, I'd rather not have that, because it is quite frightening to think that the government would hold all your personal information and that any department could look at that should they need to or wish to, or that third parties could get hold of it, or indeed worse, that other people had hacked into the system, into a digital system, and had all your information and could do all sorts of things, blackmail, fraud, who knows, deplete your bank account, etc. So these have been frightening exercises. They may not happen, but there seems to be a somewhat nefarious element to it, to keep us down, to keep us controlled, to keep us scared. Not only have we had those, but we've also had the trials. You may remember that, or experienced these trials in which the 15-minute cities have been proposed. And so there are trials in Oxford, I believe Canterbury and Cambridge, amongst many others. My town is on the list to have one of these 15-minute cities. The concept, of course, is that really it's a lockdown city in which you're supposedly within 15 minutes, either walking or cycling, although you could actually go further if you cycle than you can walk. So I don't quite know where the radius is have every amenity that you could possibly need within 15 minutes. So presumably you'd have a hospital within 15 minutes of your house. So that would naturally mean they've got to build incredible numbers of hospitals, which seems very unlikely and extremely expensive. Fire stations within 15 minutes as well, the police within 15 minutes, enough schools to serve you within 15 minutes, all your shopping requirements within 15 minutes. I mean, it does start to get a bit ridiculous. Because the notion of this is really, as they like to say it, it's a traffic calming neighbourhood. We want to reduce the amount of traffic. So what we will do is we'll fine you if you go into certain zones more than so many times a year. It's a tax, of course, to try and make you reduce your cars, the ability to travel in your cars, to reduce the number of cars on the road. Now, we all know what that's like in, let's say, at rush hour, and you're stuck in the traffic, of course, and probably there are too many cars on the road, and there is the danger of getting knocked down by idiot drivers. Of course we have that. But what is a car? A car is a symbol of freedom. It means that you can get into a vehicle on your own or with friends or your family, and you can go somewhere. You haven't got to wait for a train or a bus. You can go whenever you like. You can listen to the music of your choice. You can have private conversations. You can even talk on the phone as long as you're using hands-free equipment. It's an incredible freedom exercise. You can travel the width and the breadth of the country. You can, if you've got a camper van or a caravan or a tent, go camping and stay. You can, of course, stay in hotels and guest houses and bed and breakfasts. It gives you a freedom to crawl and travel and spread across this amazing country. Our country, and indeed any other country that is imposing these lockdown cities in which they want to compress you into one area and pretend that you'll have everything you need and that you won't be bored or sick of seeing the same old buildings and the same faces. No, a car is that expression of freedom. We've always been able to jump on a horse in the old days, or a horse and cart, and now we have the automobile, the car, a way of travelling that they do not like. They don't want us to have that amazing freedom, that sense to be able to go on a whim wherever we want. Now, it's interesting to see how people have responded to this concept of the 15-minute lockdown cities. I owe the people of Oxford an apology. I made a video a few weeks ago now in which I said that maybe how they protested was not the right way of doing it. I'd fallen into the trap, and I put my hands up completely to admit this. I'd fallen into the mistake of believing that some of the footage that I'd seen had been how the whole of their protest a weekend or so ago had taken place. And I've learnt that that's not, and I may have offended a few people by saying, is that the way you do it? The footage that I had seen, of course, had been the police arresting undesirables, people being extremely angry and shouting and wearing balaclavas. But I've since learnt, of course, and I should have known this, I should have known better, and I appreciate that these were the extremists, the far extremists of Rent-A-Mob, who come in and make your peaceful protest look like it was an ugly affray. And of course it wasn't really. And so to the people of Oxford, I apologise if I have offended anybody by my comments. It was interesting to see recently the protests and the gathering together of people in Cambridge. hundreds of people, thousands of people gathering together in solidarity, saying, we don't want this, we don't need it, it's not for us. The great thing about these times when people do get together is they're probably not only discussing the issue that's brought them out there, but also the other things that I've been talking about, the medical procedure issues, the why the government refuses to talk about it, about the bank, the CBDCs, if that's the right term, the central bank digital currencies, the ID cards, the monitoring, the surveillance, the biometrics in the towns. People are slowly waking up. They are pushing back against the fear. And the fear is all because of climate change. It's all down to this terrible thing that we've been told, that the planet is warming up, that it's going to change, that the gas of life, the carbon gas of life, carbon dioxide, we are made of carbon, plants need carbon. It is so essential to our life, but oh no, we're producing too much. Well, it's such a myth, it's such a load of nonsense. The science has not really been put over correctly. And we know this now, but people are still believing it. And they think, oh no, in fear of that, we must get rid of all our freedoms and we must curtail everything. We must get rid of the farmland. We must get rid of animal products. We must eat insects. It's all nonsense. It's all fear. The fear is what's keeping people down, and that's what they like. So we mustn't be afraid, even if they tell us such stupid stories, as I'm sure they will, that there are creatures from outer space that are now coming down in their craft, ready to destroy us. It's all fear. And the one thing we need to push back is fear. We've seen what it was like during the pandemic, and we don't need it. There is nothing to be fearful of other than the they themselves. And if we reject the fear and ever so politely say, no, thank you, we don't want this, we have a chance to push back and say no.